You are holding your newborn for the first time. You count fingers, you count toes. You promise silently that you will do everything right. Somewhere down the line, something might go wrong anyway. And for decades, if it did, there was one person doctors pointed to first. Not genetics, not the brain. You, specifically your mother. For most of the 20th century, if a child was withdrawn, if a child didn't make eye contact, if a child lined up toys instead of playing with them, doctors had an answer ready. The mother did it. Not through abuse, not through neglect anyone could see. Through something colder. Something you couldn't photograph or prove. A kind of emotional refrigeration. This is the story of where that idea came from, and why it took decades, one furious father, and a mountain of ignored evidence to tear it down. Start in Vienna in the 1930s and 40s. A young researcher named Leo Kanner is working in child psychiatry, first in Austria, then in the United States at Johns Hopkins. Kanner is watching children who seem to live in a different rhythm than everyone around them. They don't respond to their names the way other children do. They repeat phrases. They resist change in routine with something close to panic. In 1943, Kanner publishes a paper describing 11 of these children. He calls the pattern early infantile autism. It is one of the first clinical descriptions of what we now understand as autism. Here's where it goes wrong. Kanner notices something else in his small sample. The parents, he writes, seem intellectual, formal, not especially warm. He describes some of the mothers as cold, distant, and almost as an offhand observation, he plants a seed that will grow into decades of pain. He never designs a study to test whether parenting causes the condition. He just notices a pattern in 11 families and writes it down. That seed lands in fertile soil. Because the 1940s and 50s are a golden age for a very particular kind of psychiatric theory. Everything in this era traces back to the mother. Too much affection creates a dependent child, too little creates a damaged one. Somewhere in the middle is a needle almost impossible to thread. Into this climate walks a psychologist named Bruno Bettelheim. Bettelheim runs a school in Chicago for children with severe emotional and developmental differences. He survived internment in Dachau and Buchenwald before coming to the United States. And he draws a direct, explicit comparison between his own experience in the camps and the experience of an autistic child. He argues that both are responses to an environment of extreme, unrelenting threat. For the concentration camp prisoner, the threat was the guard. For the child, Bettelheim claims, the threat is the mother. He gives it a name that sticks like tar. The refrigerator mother. Cold. Withholding. Emotionally sterile. In his 1967 book, The Empty Fortress, Bettelheim writes that infantile autism is caused by a mother's wish that her child did not exist. Read that again. A doctor, in a published book, tells mothers that their child's condition exists because, somewhere inside, they wanted it to. Thousands of children are separated from their parents because of this theory. Some are placed in residential institutions, the reasoning being that distance from the toxic mother might help. Mothers are sent to psychoanalysis, sometimes for years, to unearth the buried resentment doctors were certain was there. Fathers, mostly, are left alone. The theory has a gender. It points one direction. So who pushes back? A man who has every reason to trust the experts and doesn't. Bernard Rimland is a research psychologist. He is also the father of an autistic son, Mark, born in 1956. Rimland does what almost no parent in his position was expected to do. He refuses to accept the diagnosis handed to him about himself. Instead, he goes looking for data. In 1964, Rimland publishes a book called Infantile Autism: The Syndrome and Its Implications for a Neural Theory of Behavior. It is a systematic argument, built from developmental psychology, neurology, and genetics, that autism is not caused by cold mothering. It is a difference in how the brain itself develops and processes information. Rimland doesn't just publish theory, he builds one of the first large databases of autism cases, gathering behavioral checklists from thousands of families, looking for patterns no single doctor's caseload could reveal. Around the same time, other researchers start turning up evidence that quietly demolishes the refrigerator theory piece by piece. Studies comparing the parenting styles of mothers of autistic children to mothers of neurotypical children find no meaningful difference in warmth or responsiveness. Twin studies begin showing a strong genetic component, something no amount of parenting style could produce. Brain imaging, once it becomes available decades later, will reveal structural and functional differences present from very early in development, in some cases before a mother would have had any real chance to cause anything at all. Here's the twist worth sitting with. The theory wasn't just wrong, it had things backwards. Some of the mothers Connor and Bettelheim described as cold weren't causing their child's condition. They were reacting to it. Raising a child who doesn't respond to affection the way you expect, who doesn't make eye contact, who might resist being held, can understandably change how a parent behaves. Grief, exhaustion, and confusion can look a lot like distance from the outside. The doctors were, in many cases, watching an effect and mistaking it for a cause. By the 1970s, the scientific consensus has shifted hard away from Bettelheim. In 1980, the American Psychiatric Association formally separates autism from earlier psychiatric categories tied to parenting failure, listing it as a developmental disorder in the DSM-3. The refrigerator mother theory is, by this point, professionally dead. But professional death and cultural death are not the same thing. For years afterward, older doctors, teachers, and even extended family members keep repeating a version of the old idea. Somewhere, a grandmother still wonders, quietly, if she loved her grandchild wrong. Why does a theory like this take root so easily in the first place? Because it offers something science often can't. A simple villain. A tidy explanation with a face attached to it, rather than a tangle of genes, prenatal development, and neurology that resists a single clean story. Blaming a mother is emotionally satisfying in a terrible way. It gives everyone else in the room, doctors included, the comfort of believing the problem is contained. Somewhere specific. Somewhere fixable, if only she would change. Bring this back to now. Today, when a parent researches a child's diagnosis, they're met with genetic studies, brain imaging, decades of longitudinal research. Autism is understood as neurological difference, not maternal failure, not something anyone did wrong in a nursery at 2 a.m. That shift didn't happen because psychiatry corrected itself gracefully. It happened because one father with a research background refused to accept a diagnosis of himself and built the evidence to prove it. Think about your own instinct right now when something in your life doesn't fit the expected shape. A relationship, a choice, a child. It's tempting to look for a single cause, a single person to hold responsible, because uncertainty is uncomfortable and blame feels like an answer. The refrigerator mother theory wasn't just bad science. It was a warning about how easily a comforting story can outrun the truth, and how long it can survive once it does. You are holding your newborn for the first time. You count fingers. You count toes. And somewhere down the line, whatever happens, it was never about how tightly you held them.